How do you respond in your heart or your mind when you hear us talk about those stories about the events that happen in Bangladesh or through the work that Gitta's doing? How do you respond? What's the sort of things that course through your mind and heart? You know, sometimes when I look at what they do, words that come to my mind is, oh, that's amazing. That's inspiring. It's life-changing. In fact, there's a little part of me that wants to stand up and applaud them. Do you ever feel like that? That is fantastic stuff, what you're doing. That's a real part of God's work. Do you feel like that? I do. Maybe also there's a little part of you that also makes you feel a little bit inadequate. A little inadequate. Kind of like the sense of, that's incredible what they do. I could never do something like that. I could never do something like that. It's like I put on the glasses of comparison and I look at what they do and I see them over here, or more likely over here, and I see my life down here. I'm just a builder. I'm just a banker. I'm a bus driver. What I do in the day-to-day of my life seems to make no difference. Do you believe that? That the time that you spend at work or at home amongst your friends in your neighbourhood is of no significance? Because I suspect that for many of us here, when we think about that, our response to what we see begins with these words: I'm just. I'm just. And sometimes I feel like there is this disconnect. There's this disconnect between my life and what I hope for, and almost like a chasm between what I could see is the real work of God. I'm just doing basic things, they're doing real stuff. And there's this gap between the two things. A gap between what I do with my life and the work of God. What do you think it means, even if I use that little phrase, the work of God, or if I was to use a particular catchphrase, the mission of God? What do you think that means? There's a couple of kind of fancy little Latin phrases that people with educations like myself like to use because it makes us seem very impressive. We use these words to describe important things which are part of, I believe, Christian life. The first thing little phrase that we use this one, imago Dei. That's a Latin phrase. It means to be made in the image of God. It's a central principle that we believe about life, that every single person is made in the image of God. You can see the day there. That's, like deity. The second thing which kind of connects with what we're talking about today is the Missio Dei, right? If the Imago Dei is to be made in the image of God, the Missio Dei is the mission of God, the work of God. If I asked you to describe what you think that is, I'm not going to ask you to do it out loud. What sort of words or ideas do you think you would use? I mean, what are the purposes of God in this world? I mean, if we believe that God is alive and God is powerful and acting in this world, how is He acting? How do you know where God is working? Well, a good place to start is to look at the life of Jesus, because we see the mission of God lived out through Jesus. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, Jesus lived a life full of purpose, aware of his divine purpose and commitment to the Father's will. And he declares right at the beginning of his public life these words. He says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me." So he's given me, in a sense, the imprimatur to do some of the following things, which are the work of God, the mission of God. What does it say there? You can read it just as well as I can. It says to proclaim good news to the poor, the economic poor, the spiritually poor. He sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives, recover sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour. Here is the mission of God, declared in bold letters, in bold words. Proclaim good news. Invite people to have their sin forgiven, to know God and to experience His love, to come home. To free people, to bring liberty, to free people from spiritual slavery. To heal the physically and the spiritually broken. To bring sight to those who can't see. The year of the Lord's favour, the mission of God's lived out. The cross that will defeat evil and sin. The resurrection that will overcome death and bring new life. This is the mission of God, isn't it? What the work of God is and what God is doing. And you might say, as I might say, well, that sounds great, Andrew. That's great for Jesus. That's great for Phil. Maybe for Gitta. Maybe even for the pastors. I mean, isn't that something which you professionals are meant to do? Really, my question today is, how do we live out the mission of God? Not just as a pastor, but as a builder, as a banker, as a bus driver. Do you believe that that mission is for you? For you to participate in? Or is it just for the experts? Is it just for someone else? One of the most powerful sentences in the New Testament comes at the end of Jesus' life. And he's talking to his followers. And he says these words to them. As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you. As the Father has sent me, as the Father has sent Jesus on this mission, so he is sending you. Do you hear that today? That's a message that applies for anybody here who would call themselves a follower of Jesus. It doesn't mean that I'm necessarily sending you to Bangladesh, though that might be for some. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm sending you to work with the homeless, though that might be for some. It means that I am sending you with this mission into all of your life, wherever that may be. Into your daily life and experience, into your school, into the hospital, into your neighbourhood, into your family. The mission of God in the hands of every follower of Jesus. The mission of God in the hands of every follower of Jesus. You know, I was reading a book the other day. Actually, that's not true. I was listening to an audio book the other day. It's kind of the cheats version of reading. I don't find it as effective, but sometimes it's handy when you're in the car for a while and stuff like that. Do any of you guys listen to an audio book? I don't ever seem to be able to absorb everything that's in it, but I was listening to this audio book and the author posed this question. He said, what is more interesting, a movie or a meeting? A movie or a meeting? It kind of seems like a rather stupid question, doesn't it? With an obvious answer. What's your response? A movie or a meeting? Well, obviously there's kind of meant to be a bit of a twist in the tale because he wasn't just throwing out this obvious question with an obvious answer to get an obvious response. I mean, we would say, well, movies seem a bit like entertainment, meetings seem a lot like work. But he explained, he said, well, a movie and a meeting often go for a similar length of time. Some meetings are your Pixar 90 minutes. Some of them are your Avatar 3 hours plus meetings. In a movie, we sit there and we observe. We're passive. You can't interact with the film, can you? Nothing you can do will change what happens in the movie. I'm assume that you're not a person who, when you're in a cinema, kind of yells out. You know what I mean? Like, hey, watch out, there's someone behind you. Don't go into that. I assume that you don't do that when you're watching a movie. And the truth is that most of the time we leave the movie behind and it has no impact on our life. It makes not one skerrick of difference to life. And then this person went on to explain, well, a meeting, at least a good meeting, it should have some impact because it involves us. It should engage us. We should have some sense of a say in the outcomes. It should be a dialogue, not monologue. It's about engagement, not passive. And the point the author was trying to make is rather obvious. In one, we're a spectator. In the other, we're a participant. But as I was listening to this author read the book that he had written, my mind immediately raced to faith. Because as much as he was talking about it in a form of leadership and what constitutes good leadership, my immediately relates to real faith, living faith versus dying faith. You see, if you think about it this way, if our faith is passive, if it's disengaged, if we believe that it has no impact, it's kind of like a long meeting that we just simply sit there, and whether we literally twiddle our thumbs or we just kind of do it figuratively, we're completely disengaged. Our mind starts to think about, what jobs have I got to do? Which people do I have to catch up with? But if we're engaged, if we're invested, if we think that we've actually got some sort of say in it, some sense of participating, if I've got some sense that I'm actually needed in this, well, then I'm there. Then I'm focused and I'm ready and I actually want to be involved. You see, because being a follower of Jesus is about being a participant, isn't it? Not a spectator. You think about the jobs that you've been employed in, or if you've never been employed in this type of job, think about some other aspect of life. You know, you might have been a student in some place or in some other aspect of life. Think about when you've known what this job is about and when I'm invested in it versus when I am completely indifferent to it. What made you feel either empowered or disconnected? What made you feel invested in the outcome or indifferent to the outcome? What made you feel like I'm engaged, my mind is thinking about it, my emotions are attached to it, my will and my energy is a part of this? See, when you have a job and you don't know why you're doing it, when you don't know what difference you make, you tend to do it really badly, don't you? At best, you go through the motions, do it by rote, and just check on a Thursday to see that you've been paid. You have no sense of value, no sense of agency, no sense of control over the job. You get no sense of achievement, no sense of job satisfaction. You get paid in dollars, but your soul is never nourished. Time feels like it drags. You feel like each day is wasted. If your faith feels like a boring job, you have no sense of value, no sense of meaningful purpose, no sense of making a difference, either what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. Time will feel like it drags. Each day is wasted. You'll go through the motions, but your soul will never be nourished. Faith is obviously not meant to be like that, is it? You know that answer as much as I do. Where do you think your faith is in that journey? You see, to To live a meaningful Christian life, you need to be engaged in the mission of God. Because that's the purpose of which we're called to God, isn't it? You see, when Jesus says, "As I've sent my followers, so I am sending you," he's sending us, each one of us, for a purpose. What do you think that is? Well, you think about what it means to proclaim good news. It's good news, a message of hope, isn't it? It's a message of what the future entails when we're reminded about the God of love who sustains this world, the Jesus, the one who brings forgiveness, the message of reconciliation. When we bring the presence of Jesus into a world that desperately needs him, we become people of peace. We bring help to those who are hurting, healing to those who are broken. We walk alongside those who are going through pain and bring comfort and care. You see, that's the message of what it means for each one of us to be involved in this mission, isn't it? And you know what? It doesn't matter whether you're a pastor, whether you're working in Bangladesh, whether you're working in the homeless, whether you're a banker, a builder, a bus driver. It doesn't matter whether you're doing any of those, because you can do the mission of God in all of those spaces, in each one of them. You see, my faith should never be confined to a couple of hours on a Sunday. I live it out when I'm at home, when I'm at work, when I'm at play. Do you believe that today? Do you understand it for yourself? And so you know that when you get up on, not Sunday morning, but Monday morning, that today I'm going to be involved in the mission of God. When I sit alongside my colleague at work, I'm involved in the mission of God. When I go and do the shopping, I can still be involved in the mission of God. When I'm with my family, when I'm with my neighbours, I'm still a part of the mission of God. Now, the very heart of this church was built around the idea of being a part of the mission of God here in Croydon Hills. Churches tend to be, we sometimes think about the location as a building. But the truth is that this church is involved in the mission of God, not just here in Croydon Hills, but in hundreds of places, in hundreds of homes and neighbourhoods, and hundreds of businesses and schools. Because you and me, each one of us, is called to live out that mission. Jesus said these words to his closest followers 2,000 years ago. But he sends them to each one of us today, right now. As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you. Let's pray. For our God, we thank you. We thank you for your great heart and great mission. A world that has run away from you, and yet you, in your love and compassion and kindness, reaches out and calls people back to yourself. Reaches out into the brokenness of this world and seeks to restore. Reaches out to where there is people who are hurting, people who are filled with guilt and shame, and brings messages of hope and forgiveness. God, we thank you that you reached out to us with that same message. And so, our God, we would pray, as much as we have received, may we also give. God, I pray that for each one of us here, that we would grab and see just a little bit more of a glimpse of what it means to be part of your mission. To understand that each one of us is needed. Each one of us are called to be your hands, called to be your voice. And so, God, I pray that when we leave this place, that we would take that mission with us. When we rise tomorrow morning, when we go to our schools, our workplaces, when we interact with our friends and our family, that we would be reminded that we're always on your mission. Father, I thank you for that privilege of helping to restore a world to the way in which it's meant to be. To be people that bring messages of hope and of love. In the name of Jesus we pray.